The air in the room was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your breath catch in your throat. Billionaire owners in their custom-tailored suits sat on one side of the polished mahogany table, their faces a mixture of arrogance and disbelief. On the other side, Caitlin Clark, the WNBA's golden girl, stood with an unnerving calm that seemed to defy the gravity of the moment. Her hands rested on the back of her chair, knuckles slightly white, but her expression remained as composed as a frozen lake. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before she finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. "I appreciate the offer," she began, her words measured and deliberate, "but I'm done settling." The collective gasp in the room was audible, a ripple of shock that seemed to physically move through the space. One owner's jaw literally dropped, his expensive pen clattering onto the table. Another leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as if trying to process words that made no sense in his world of numbers and negotiations. $500,000 a year, a minimum salary of $225,000, $1 million max with revenue sharing potential. These weren't just numbers. They were life-changing figures that would transform the financial landscape of women's basketball forever. And yet, the woman who stood to benefit most was turning it down. The room held its breath as Clark continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "This isn't just about money. This is about respect. This is about building something that lasts, something real, and I won't be part of a deal that looks good on paper, but crumbles under the weight of broken promises." The owners exchanged glances, their smug confidence replaced by something else, a flicker of fear, perhaps, or the dawning realization that they had underestimated the woman before them. Outside these walls, millions of fans were watching, waiting, hoping for a sign that their hero would stand for something more than personal gain. And inside, as Caitlin Clark looked each owner in the eye, something extraordinary was happening. A line was being drawn in the sand, not just between player and ownership, but between past and future, between settling and striving, between what is and what could be. But what happened next left the entire country in disbelief. Picture this: a room filled with the most powerful figures in women's basketball, billionaires and executives who have controlled the WNBA's destiny for decades. They've gathered around a polished mahogany table, confident smiles plastered across their faces as they unveil what they believe to be a game-changing proposal. The numbers they're throwing around are astronomical by WNBA standards. A minimum salary of $225,000, an average salary hitting $500,000, and top players potentially earning over $1.2 million annually. These aren't just figures. They're lifelines that would transform players from struggling athletes to financially secure professionals overnight. The league's presentation team clicks through slides showing projections of player wealth, highlighting how this deal would create generational opportunities for women who have historically been undervalued in professional sports. But what the owners don't realize is that they're walking into a negotiation blind, armed only with numbers while missing the bigger picture entirely. The WNBA Players Association sits across from them, their expressions unreadable, taking notes as if they're impressed by the offer. Yet beneath this composed exterior, they've already identified the cracks in what appears to be a golden opportunity. They see the vague language around revenue sharing, the mathematical inconsistencies between salary caps and promised averages, and the subtle attempts to control players' lives beyond the court. The owners believe they're offering a slam-dunk deal that players would be foolish to reject, but they've fundamentally misunderstood what this moment represents. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about dignity, respect, and the future of women's professional basketball. What happens next will determine whether the WNBA takes its rightful place as a premier sports league or remains trapped in a cycle of token gestures disguised as progress. The players are about to make a move that will send shockwaves through the entire sports world, challenging not just this offer, but the very foundation of how women athletes are valued. Behind the polished press releases and carefully crafted public statements lies a truth the WNBA's billionaire owners would prefer remain buried in boardroom minutes and offshore accounts. These aren't just benevolent patrons of women's sports. They're corporate sharks who perfected the art of appearing progressive while protecting their bottom line with ruthless efficiency. For decades, they presided over a system where players were expected to be grateful for barely livable wages, while owners wrote off losses as tax deductions and PR expenses. They hosted lavish galas celebrating women's empowerment, while their players worked second jobs in the off-season just to make ends meet. The hypocrisy would be laughable if it weren't so damaging. These owners, many of whom inherited their wealth or built fortunes in industries notorious for exploiting labor, suddenly positioned themselves as saviors when they proposed this new deal. But sources close to the negotiations reveal a different story. One a panic as ratings soar with Caitlin Clark's arrival, and owners realizing they might actually have to share real revenue. Their historic offer wasn't born from generosity but from fear. Fear of losing control, fear of a player's movement they couldn't contain, fear of the very success they claimed to want. One owner was overheard at a recent charity event complaining, "These players don't understand their place. We built this league, and we can tear it down too." Another was caught on a hot mic dismissing players' concerns as entitlement from people who should be grateful we even gave them a league to play in. The most revealing moment came when a group of owners met secretly to discuss their Clark problem, how her growing influence was disrupting their carefully controlled narrative and empowering other players to demand more. What they offered in public was a $500,000 salary. What they planned in private was a system that would keep players financially dependent while creating the illusion of progress. But they made one critical miscalculation. They underestimated the woman who would soon turn their own game against them. In the heartland of America, where cornfields stretch to the horizon and basketball dreams are born in small-town gyms, a legend was taking shape. Caitlin Clark wasn't just another phenom from Iowa. She was a force of nature destined to reshape women's basketball forever. Born in Des Moines to a family that valued hard work over handouts, Clark learned early that greatness wasn't given. It was seized, moment by moment, shot by shot. Her father, a former Division II player, built a backyard court where Caitlin would spend countless hours honing her signature step-back three, often practicing until her fingers bled and her muscles screamed. This wasn't just dedication. It was obsession, the kind that separates the good from the immortal. What most casual fans don't realize is that Clark's journey was never about personal glory. In high school, when she could have transferred to a basketball factory for more exposure, she stayed loyal to Dowling Catholic, telling reporters, "This is my community, these are my people." That loyalty would become her trademark, but also her burden. As recruiting offers pour in from powerhouses like UConn and Notre Dame, Clark shocked the basketball world by choosing Iowa. Not for nil deals or national championships, but because she felt a call to elevate something that wasn't already at the top. "Why join the mountain when you can build one?" she told a local reporter, foreshadowing the revolutionary mindset that would later define her professional career. The college years transformed Clark from regional star to national phenomenon. Her freshman season arrived just as the sports world was grappling with how to value women's athletics. While the NCAA tournament generated millions in revenue, Clark and her teammates received none of it, playing for the love of the game, while their male counterparts at lesser programs enjoyed full scholarships, training facilities, and media attention. This inequity didn't just anger Clark. It radicalized her. In press conferences, she began subtly weaving questions about fairness into her answers, never missing an opportunity to highlight disparities without sounding bitter. Reporters marveled at how she could drop 40 points one night and deliver a graduate-level discourse on economic justice the next morning. The 2023 NCAA tournament became Clark's national coming-out party. Her logo three-pointers from near half-court weren't just spectacular shots. They were acts of defiance against a system that had tried to contain women's basketball within traditional boundaries. When she broke the all-time scoring record, surpassing players both male and female, she didn't celebrate with theatrics but with a simple statement. Records are meant to be broken. Barriers aren't. That line sent shockwaves to the sports world, signaling that Clark understood her role transcended basketball. She wasn't just playing a game. She was leading a movement. What made Clark truly different, though, was how she handled adversity. After a heartbreaking loss to LSU in the championship game, where she faced not just elite competition, but also racist and sexist trolling from so-called fans, she could have retreated into bitterness. Instead, she held a press conference that would become legendary in sports journalism. To every little girl who dreams of playing but wonders if she belongs, Clark said, her voice steady despite visible disappointment. Let me be clear. This game is as much yours as anyone's. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That moment transformed Clark from basketball star to cultural icon, someone who understood that her platform carried responsibility far beyond the court. As Clark's star rose, so did her awareness of the economic structures surrounding women's sports. While her name sold jerseys and filled arenas, she watched as other players, talented but less marketable, struggled to pay rent during the off-season. This inequity became personal when her Iowa teammate, who had sacrificed just as much, announced she was leaving basketball to take a regular job because she couldn't afford to continue playing professionally. That's when I knew something had to change. Clark later admitted in an interview, this wasn't just about my future anymore. It was about all of us. The transition to professional basketball only sharpened Clark's resolve. As the #1 draft pick, she could have focused solely on her own career, maximizing endorsements and building her brand. Instead, she immediately began studying the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement, often staying up until 3 a.m. reading financial reports and salary structures. Teammates marveled at how someone with her talent and marketability would concern herself with the minutiae of revenue sharing and salary caps. Caitlin doesn't just want to be a great player, said one veteran teammate. She wants to build a great league. There's a difference. This unique combination of superstar talent and labor activist mindset made Clark perfectly positioned for the confrontation that was brewing. While other players might have accepted the league's offer without question, Clark's background had taught her to look beyond surface appearances. Her Midwestern roots gave her an authenticity that resonated with fans across the political spectrum. Her understanding of economic justice made her skeptical of seemingly generous offers with hidden strings. Her experience with media scrutiny had prepared her to stand firm under pressure. Most importantly, her unwavering belief that women's basketball deserved not just respect but genuine investment had prepared her to reject anything less. As Clark stood at the crossroads of her career, facing an offer that would make her wealthy but might compromise her principles, she drew strength from all these experiences. The little girl practicing in her backyard, the college star challenging inequities, the professional player studying collective bargaining agreements. All these versions of herself converged in this moment. What the league didn't understand was that they weren't just negotiating with a basketball player. They were negotiating with a movement. And movements, as history has shown, don't settle for half measures, no matter how generously they're packaged. The tension in the room was palpable as Caitlin Clark and the Players Association representatives sat across from the league's negotiating team. What had begun as a celebration of progress had quickly devolved into a battle of wills, with neither side willing to back down. The league's lead negotiator, a silver-haired executive with decades of experience, leaned forward with a condescending smile that barely masked his frustration. Miss Clark, we're offering you and your colleagues a deal that will make you some of the highest-paid female athletes in the world. We're talking about quadrupling salaries overnight. I'm struggling to understand what more you could possibly want. Caitlin's eyes narrowed slightly, her calm exterior betraying none of the fire burning beneath. With all due respect, what you're offering comes with conditions that undermine its value. You presented us with a mathematical impossibility, an average salary of $500,000 with a team salary cap of $5 million for 12 players. Perhaps your calculator works differently than mine, but those numbers don't add up. The executive's smile tightened as other league officials shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The salary cap would increase over time and be tied to revenue growth, he countered, his voice losing some of its earlier confidence. We've been transparent about that. Transparent? Caitlin replied, her voice steady but carrying an unmistakable edge. You've offered vague promises about revenue sharing without specifying the exact percentages. You're asking us to sign away our rights based on projections that aren't clearly defined. That's not transparency. That's a gamble with our careers. The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over negotiations. The league's team exchanged nervous glances, clearly unprepared for Clark's methodical dismantling of their proposal. They had expected gratitude, not scrutiny. They had anticipated celebration, not confrontation. As if sensing he was losing control of the narrative, the executive changed tactics, his tone becoming more aggressive. Let's talk about what's really holding this up. You're demanding that we continue providing free housing for players making hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's simply unreasonable. Caitlin's jaw tightened at the mention of housing, but before she could respond, Players Association President Nneka Agwamike interjected with measured intensity. What's unreasonable is offering life-changing salaries while simultaneously taking away benefits that have been standard in our league for years. You're asking players to navigate unfamiliar cities during a compressed season while managing the pressures of being professional athletes. Housing isn't just a perk. It's a necessary support system that allows players to focus on their performance. Professional athletes in every other major sport manage their own housing. Shot back another league official, her voice dripping with impatience. NBA players don't get free housing. NFL players don't either. Why should WNBA players be any different? The comparison hung in the air, loaded with unspoken implications. Before the Players Association could respond, Caitlin leaned forward, her voice cutting through the tension like glass. Because for decades, WNBA players have been paid a fraction of what our male counterparts earn, while generating value that far exceeds our compensation. We played overseas in the off-season just to make ends meet. We've been asked to be ambassadors for the game while struggling to pay our bills. These housing benefits weren't handouts. They were recognition of the unique challenges we face as underpaid women athletes. The room grew deathly quiet as Caitlin's words reverberated off the walls. The league's negotiating team looked genuinely stunned, as if they hadn't expected such a forceful response. They had come prepared to discuss numbers, not to confront the historical inequities that have defined women's professional basketball. Sensing an advantage, the Players Association representative pressed forward. And let's talk about your proposed schedule changes. Starting the season earlier to compete with March Madness? That's not just bad business. It's cutting off the free marketing that introduces future stars to the world. You're essentially asking us to sabotage our own growth. The executive slammed his hand on the table, his composure finally cracking. We're trying to build a sustainable business model. We're trying to compete with startup leagues that are poaching our players. We're trying to avoid competing with the NFL for viewership. We've offered you a deal that would transform your financial lives, and you're nitpicking details like housing and scheduling. As his voice echoed through the room, Caitlin exchanged a knowing glance with her teammates. They had reached a breaking point. The moment when the league's mask of benevolence had slipped to reveal the cold calculus beneath. What had been presented as a generous offer was beginning to look more like a power play, designed to give owners more control while creating the illusion of progress. But what happened next left the entire league in disbelief. The conference room fell silent as Caitlin Clark rose from her chair, her steady gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the league executives. For a moment, the only sound was a faint hum of the air conditioning, the weight of her decision hanging in the air like a storm cloud about to burst. Then she spoke, her voice calm but carrying the unmistakable force of conviction. "Let's be clear about something," she began, her eyes locking with the lead negotiator. "This isn't just about numbers on a page. This is about respect, transparency, and the future of this league we've all worked so hard to build." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "You've come to us with what appears to be a groundbreaking offer. $500,000 average salary, minimums of $225,000, max contracts hitting $1 million. On the surface, it looks generous. It looks like progress. But when you look closer, when you do the math, something doesn't add up." Clark slid a piece of paper across the table, her finger pointing to a series of calculations. "You're offering an average salary of $500,000, but you're capping team salaries at $5 million for 12 players. I'm no mathematician, but even I can tell you that doesn't compute. For that average to be possible, the salary cap would need to be $6 million per team. So which is it? Are you promising something you can't deliver, or are you hoping we won't notice the discrepancy?" The executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their carefully crafted presentation beginning to unravel. "And then there's a housing issue," Clark continued, her voice unwavering. "You want to eliminate the housing benefit while claiming to offer life-changing salaries. Make no mistake, $225,000 is life-changing, and players at that level can certainly afford their own housing. But this isn't just about the math. It's about the message you're sending. She leaned forward slightly, her intensity palpable. By removing this benefit, you're signaling that you don't see us as partners in this enterprise. You see us as employees to be managed. The NBA doesn't provide housing. The NFL doesn't provide housing. But those leagues didn't build their foundation on the promise of comprehensive support that you're now chipping away at. Clark straightened up, her presence commanding the room. And March Madness. You want to start the season earlier, cutting into the very tournament that creates the stars who drive your league's growth. That's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. March Madness isn't competition. It's the greatest marketing machine you've ever had, and you want to sabotage it. The lead negotiator opened his mouth to speak, but Clark held up a hand, silencing him. "Let me be crystal clear about what we're asking for," she said, her voice dropping slightly but losing none of its power. "We want transparency in your revenue-sharing model. We want the salary cap to align with the average salary you're promising. We want to maintain the housing benefit for players on shorter contracts who genuinely need it. And we want to work with you to create a schedule that complements rather than competes with March Madness." She looked around the room, making eye contact with each person before delivering her final statement. "This isn't just about me. This isn't just about the stars. This is about every player who has ever struggled to make ends meet in the off-season. This is about creating a sustainable league where players are true partners in growth, not just expenses to be managed." Clark stood up straight, her posture radiating confidence and determination. "I'm done settling for half measures disguised as progress. I'm done accepting offers that look good in headlines but fall apart under scrutiny. I'm done being grateful for table scraps when we deserve a seat at the table." She paused, her final words hanging in the air with undeniable weight. "Come back to us with a real offer, one that respects us as partners, one that delivers on its promises, one that builds rather than dismantles. Until then, the answer is no." As she turned to leave, the room remained silent, the executives frozen in their seats. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving them to grapple with the reality that their seemingly generous offer had been systematically dismantled by the very player they hoped to appease. Outside the conference room, Clark took a deep breath, knowing that her words would soon reverberate throughout the sports world. She had drawn a line in the sand, not just for herself, but for every player who had ever been undervalued, underestimated, or overlooked. But as she walked away from the negotiating table, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test not only her resolve but the very foundation of the league she loved. The moment Caitlin Clark walked out of that negotiating room, the digital world erupted. Within minutes, hashtag Clark Effect was trending nationwide, followed quickly by hashtag WNBA standup and hashtag done settling. Twitter became a battlefield of opinions, with fans, athletes, and celebrities weighing in on the controversy that had just unfolded. Former NBA star-turned-analyst Magic Johnson tweeted, "This young woman is changing the game on and off the court. Respect." Meanwhile, conservative commentator Clay Travis posted, "Entitled athletes turning down $500,000? This is what's wrong with America." The divide was clear, and the conversation was just getting started. By morning, every sports talk show was leading with Clark's rejection, and the story had crossed over into mainstream news. CNN's morning show dedicated a full segment to what they were calling the WNBA's defining moment, while Fox News framed it as millionaire athletes demanding more. The narrative was being shaped in real time, and the league was losing control of it. Inside WNBA headquarters, chaos reigned. Emergency meetings were called, with team owners dialing in from yachts and vacation homes across the country. The mood was panic mixed with fury. "We offered them life-changing money," one owner reportedly shouted during a heated conference call. "And they're worried about housing? This is ridiculous." But behind closed doors, some owners were quietly impressed. They saw in Clark what the public was seeing, a leader willing to risk everything for principle. These owners understood that this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the future of their league. As the days passed, the movement behind Clark grew stronger. Other players began speaking out, sharing stories of financial struggles despite their professional status. People don't realize that most WNBA players have to play overseas just to make ends meet, tweeted Aya Wilson, the league's MVP. What Caitlin is fighting for isn't just for herself, it's for all of us. The hashtag more than athletes began circulating, accompanied by photos of players working second jobs during the off-season, coaching youth clinics, and pursuing advanced degrees. The human face of the league was emerging, and it was compelling. Sponsors started feeling the pressure. Nike, which had recently signed Clark to a lucrative endorsement deal, released a carefully worded statement supporting fair compensation for all athletes. Meanwhile, companies that had been considering partnerships with the WNBA put their plans on hold, waiting to see how this labor dispute would resolve. The financial stakes were becoming clear. This wasn't just a PR crisis. It was an existential threat to the league's business model. Perhaps most surprisingly, fans began organizing. In cities across the country, small rallies formed outside WNBA arenas, with supporters holding signs that read "Fair Pay Now" and "Stand with Caitlin." Season ticket holders started email campaigns to team owners, demanding they meet the players' reasonable requests. The league had always prided itself on having the most socially conscious fan base in professional sports, and now those fans were turning their activism toward the league itself. The media narrative continued to shift as more details emerged about the owner's financial situation. Investigative journalists revealed that while most WNBA teams operated at a loss, their parent companies often benefited enormously from the positive publicity and tax advantages associated with owning a sports franchise. The story was becoming more complex than simple rich owners versus entitled players. It was about systemic undervaluation of women's sports and the economic structures that perpetuated it. As the week progressed, Clark became the face of a movement far larger than herself. She appeared on Good Morning America, not as a disgruntled employee, but as a thoughtful advocate for change. "This isn't just about my salary," she explained calmly. "It's about creating a sustainable league where players can focus on being the best athletes they can be, rather than worrying about how they'll pay rent in the off-season." Her words resonated far beyond the sports world, striking a chord with anyone who had ever felt undervalued in their profession. The ripple effects were being felt throughout women's sports. The USWNT, which had fought its own battle for equal pay, publicly supported the WNBA players. College basketball coaches expressed concern about how this might impact their players' decisions to turn professional. Even athletes from completely different sports, like soccer star Megan Rapinoe and tennis champion Naomi Osaka, weighed in with messages of support. The WNBA found itself at the center of a national conversation about gender equity in sports, and they were losing control of the narrative. As the weekend approached, the Players Association called a press conference. The sports world held its breath, wondering what move they would make next. Would they accept a revised deal? Would they strike? The tension was palpable, and the stakes had never been higher. The league's momentum was at risk, but so was the players' future. Both sides were playing a dangerous game of chicken, with the future of women's professional basketball hanging in the balance. What the WNBA owners failed to grasp in their panic-filled boardrooms was that this was never just about money. This was about dignity. This was about respect. This was about the fundamental right to be seen as equal partners in building something historic. Caitlin Clark's rejection of that $500,000 offer wasn't just a contract negotiation. It was a declaration that the era of token gestures and half measures was over. In that moment, standing before the media with her chin held high, Clark didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for every woman who had ever been told to be grateful for less than she deserved. She spoke for every athlete who had poured her heart into a sport only to be told her market value didn't match her actual value. And most importantly, she spoke to a new generation of fans who understand that true progress isn't measured in dollar signs alone, but in the genuine respect behind those figures. The beauty of Clark's stand was how she reframed the entire conversation. It wasn't about rejecting a life-changing salary. It was about rejecting a system that still treated players as afterthoughts in their own league. The math didn't add up because the respect wasn't there. The housing benefits weren't just about free apartments. They were about acknowledging that players have been undercompensated for so long that basic necessities became part of the negotiation. And the March Madness scheduling conflict wasn't just about calendar dates. It was about recognizing that the very platform that creates these stars deserves protection, not sacrifice for short-term business gains. What we witnessed in those tense days of negotiation was something transcendent happening in real time. A 22-year-old phenom teaching billionaire owners a lesson in integrity. A collective of players choosing principle over comfort. A league at a crossroads, forced to confront whether it truly valued the women who made it spectacular. The resolution here wasn't about who won or lost a negotiation. It was about how Clark elevated the entire discourse around women's sports. She didn't just demand better pay. She demanded better treatment. She didn't just ask for transparency. She demanded partnership. She didn't just seek financial security. She insisted on the respect that had always been withheld. And in doing so, she created a new template for how athletes can leverage their power not just for personal gain, but for collective advancement. The moral lesson here extends far beyond basketball courts and contract negotiations. It's about understanding that true progress requires more than surface-level changes. It's about recognizing that dignity and respect cannot be purchased with money alone. It's about acknowledging that those who build a value deserve to share in that value, not as charity, but as their fundamental right. What Clark and the Players Association demonstrated was that the path to equality requires courage to say no to good deals when better, more respectful deals are possible. It requires vision to see beyond immediate financial gains to the systemic changes that create lasting impact. And it requires solidarity to stand together when individual compromise would be easier. As the negotiations continue behind closed doors, something has already shifted permanently in the landscape of women's sports. The conversation has been elevated. The expectations have been raised. The line has been drawn. And somewhere in that space between what was offered and what was demanded, a new understanding is emerging. That true partnership between players and owners isn't just about splitting revenue, but about sharing power, respect, and vision for what the WNBA can become. That's a resolution that no contract clause could ever contain. That's the moral victory that transcends any financial terms. And that's the foundation upon which a truly equitable future for women's basketball will ultimately be built. So there you have it. The WNBA offered life-changing money, and Caitlin Clark essentially said, not good enough. Now we're all holding our breath, wondering if this gamble will pay off or if it will torch everything the league has worked so hard to build. This isn't just about dollars and cents anymore. It's about dignity, respect, and the very soul of women's professional sports. Clark didn't just reject a contract. She sent a message that the era of settling for scraps is over. That the women who built this league with their blood, sweat, and tears deserve to be treated as partners, not afterthoughts. In a world that constantly tells women to know their place, to be grateful for whatever they're given, Caitlin Clark stood up and said, I know my worth, and I'm done settling for less. That kind of courage doesn't just belong on the basketball court. It belongs in every workplace, every industry, every corner of society where women are told to accept less than they deserve. The ripple effect of this moment extends far beyond the WNBA. It's about every woman who's ever been asked to smile and accept an unfair deal. Every immigrant who's been told to be grateful for whatever opportunity comes their way. Every person from marginalized communities who's been expected to accept the table's scraps when they help prepare the entire feast. Clark's stand is our stand. Her fight for dignity is our fight. And her refusal to settle is a reminder to all of us that sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to walk away from a deal that doesn't honor your full value. If you believe in this movement, if you believe that women athletes deserve the same respect and compensation as their male counterparts, then hit that subscribe button and join our community of changemakers. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Should the players take this deal or hold firm for something better? Because your voice matters in this conversation. The owners need to see that we're watching, that we care, and that we stand with the players who bring so much joy, inspiration, and excellence to our lives. The future of the WNBA hangs in the balance. But together, we can help ensure a future where women athletes are finally treated with the respect and compensation they've earned. The game has changed. Now it's time for the lead to change with it.